The first thing Bryce did when he walked into the office wasn't introduce himself to the team. It was to complain that the ergonomic Herman Miller chairs didn't have enough lumbar aggression. That was the phrase he used, lumbar aggression. I sat in the back of the conference room, nursing a lukewarm coffee that tasted like burnt ambition and office supplies, watching him pace. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my first car and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Predator in Italian wool. He was the new CTO, brought in specifically to grease the wheels for the impending $500 million merger with Apex Corp. But from where I was sitting, Bryce wasn't grease. He was sand, and he was about to get poured directly into the gears of machine I had spent 15 years building. I'm Karen. No, not that kind of Karen. I don't ask for managers. I am the person managers call when the digital sky is falling. I'm a lead product security engineer. In plain English, I build the vaults where the company keeps its skeletons, its gold, and its proprietary algorithms. I don't talk much. I don't network. I don't do team building trust falls because I know exactly who in this room would drop me to save their quarterly bonus. I write code that works. I encrypt data that needs to stay buried, and I go home to my cat and my silence. But silence, apparently, is a liability when a guy like Bryce enters the room. "Listen up, rock stars," Bryce announced, clapping his hands together with a sound that echoed like a gunshot in the quiet room. He had that energetic, manic vibe of a guy who microdoses mushrooms and listens to podcasts about biohacking. "We have 6 weeks until the merger ink dries. 6 weeks to trim the fat. I've been looking at the repo, and honestly, it's a mess. It's bloated. It's legacy." Said the word legacy like it was a slur. In the tech world, legacy usually means old and clunky. But in my corner of the world, high-level encryption and product security, legacy means battle-tested. It means this code has survived Russian botnets, Chinese phishing campaigns, and 3 different catastrophic server floods. But Bryce didn't see armor. He saw rust. "We need to be agile," Bryce continued, pacing so fast I got dizzy just watching him. "Need to be lean. If a piece of code isn't directly driving revenue or user acquisition, it's dead weight. We are purging the system. We are going to migrate everything to the cloud-native, serverless architecture I implemented at my last startup." A murmur went through the room. His last startup had imploded because they leaked 40,000 user credit card numbers on the dark web. But nobody said that. Everyone just nodded, terrified for their jobs. "Karen," I said, pivoting suddenly to point a manicured finger at me. "You're in charge of, what is it? Internal protocol security? That sounds like a fancy word for cost center." I didn't blink. I just set my coffee cup down, deliberately slow. "It's encryption, Bryce. I secure the data transfer tunnels. Without them, the merger documents are just plain text files floating on the internet for anyone to grab." He laughed. A short, barking sound. "Encryption. Right. Have third-party tools for that now. AWS handles that. We don't need custom scripts clogging up the pipeline. Your department, it feels heavy. It feels like it got comfortable." "Comfortable?" I repeated, my voice flat. "My code is the only reason we passed the SEC audit last year." "That was last year," Bryce dismissed, waving his hand as if swatting away a fly. "This is the future. We are cutting the cord. I want a full audit of your repositories by Friday. Anything that isn't critical to the UI demo gets archived. And by archived, I mean deleted. Hey, real quick, if you're enjoying this dive into corporate madness, do me a favor and hit subscribe. It helps us keep the lights on and the stories coming." Okay, back to the carnage. The meeting ended with a flurry of buzzwords: synergy, paradigm shift, low-hanging fruit. I walked back to my desk, my stomach churning with a cold, hard knot of realization. This wasn't just a restructuring. This was a demolition. Bryce didn't understand the architecture. He looked at a load-bearing wall and saw something that blocked his view, so he was going to take a sledgehammer to it. The problem was, the wall he wanted to knock down, my core synthesis project, wasn't just some old script. It was the master key generator. It was a complex, multi-layered system that constantly rotated the decryption keys for our most sensitive legal archives. If you deleted that, you didn't just lose the code. You lost the ability to read every contract, every patent, and every merger document we had signed in the last decade. It was designed to be secure. It was designed so that if someone hacked us, they couldn't read the files without the live generator. And Bryce wanted to delete it because he thought it looked bloated. I sat at my desk, surrounded by 3 monitors glowing with the comforting green and white of terminal text. I could have marched into his office. I could have drawn a diagram. I could have shouted. But I knew men like Bryce. If I fought him, he would dig in. He would see it as a challenge to his authority. He would fire me for insubordination and then delete the code anyway, just to prove a point. No, I needed a different approach. My Slack pinged. It was Dave, junior dev who still thought open source libraries were safe to use without checking the dependencies. Dave, hey Karen, did you see? Bryce just revoked write access to the main repo for the security team. He says he wants to approve all commits personally to ensure code hygiene. I checked my terminal. Git push. Error, 403 forbidden. Write access denied. He had locked me out of my own house. He had taken the keys to the vault and handed them to a guy who thought password 123 was too complex. A normal person would panic. A normal person would call HR. I just felt a strange, icy calm settle over me. It was the same feeling I got when I was debugging a critical failure at 3 a.m. The emotion drains away, replaced by pure logic. If X, then Y. If Bryce wanted to play God with the file system, let him. But I wasn't going to let him burn the company down without an insurance policy. I opened a separate terminal window, one that didn't log to the central server. I typed in a command I hadn't used in years. Git clone mirror. I wasn't just downloading the files. I was cloning the entire history, the branches, the tags, and most importantly, the encryption logic that lived in the hidden subdirectories Bryce didn't even know how to list. I pulled it all down, every line of code I had written for 15 years. The progress bar crawled across the screen. 10%, 35%, 68%, Karen. I minimized the window instantly. Bryce was standing at my cubicle wall, leaning over like a guidance counselor trying to relate to a troubled teen. "We need to talk about your attitude in the meeting," he said, smoothing his tie. "I know change is hard. I know you old guard engineers get attached to your little scripts. But I need team players. I need people who are hungry." I looked up at him, keeping my face completely blank. "I understand, Bryce. You want efficiency. You want modern." "Exactly," he pointed at me, beaming. "See, you get it. I'm going to need you to hand over the documentation for your encryption protocols. I'm bringing in a consulting firm, some guys I know from Stanford, to rewrite it in Rust. Faster, cleaner, rewrite the encryption logic," I said slowly. "In 6 weeks. They're wizards, Karen, wizards. Just give them the docs." "Sure," I lied. "I'll compile them for you. Great, and hey, let's try to smile more, yeah? The merger is a celebration." He tapped my desk twice and walked away, already typing on his phone. I brought the terminal window back up. Status, 100% complete. I pulled a heavily encrypted, hardware-locked USB drive from my lanyard. It was a ruggedized drive, the kind you could run over with a tank. I plugged it in. I moved the mirrored repository onto the drive. Then, I initiated a script on my local machine to scrub the logs of the download. I wasn't stealing the company's property. I was saving its life. Or maybe I was preparing the weapon that would end it. I hadn't decided yet. As I watched Bryce high-five the sales VP across the room, talking loudly about how he was disrupting the workflow, I knew one thing for sure. He was going to delete the safety protocols. He was going to cut the parachute because he thought the backpack looked too heavy. And when he hit the ground, I wanted to make sure I was the only one holding the ripcord. I ejected the USB drive. I put it in my pocket. It felt heavy, like a stone. "Want legacy gone, Bryce?" I whispered to the empty air. "Be careful what you wish for." The first shot had been fired. He had revoked my access. He had insulted my work. He had threatened my team. Now, I was just going to sit back and watch him load the gun he was pointing at his own foot. The next morning, the office smelled like ozone and panic. Bryce had evidently pulled an all-nighter, not working, mind you, but creating the list. It was a shared Google sheet titled Project Zero, Redundancy Elimination, and it was currently projected on the massive 80-inch monitors in the main engineering bay. It was a kill list. Rows and rows of file names, directories, and libraries were highlighted in neon red. Beside each one was a status column, pending deletion. I walked in, holding my tea, and stood next to Dave. Poor Dave looked like he was about to vomit. He was vibrating. "He's deleting the load balancers," Dave whispered, his voice cracking. "Karen, look at row 42. He marked the Traffic Shaper Pi script as redundant because he said the cloud provider does it automatically. The cloud provider charges us 10 cents per gigabyte for that service," I said calmly. "My script does it for free. He doesn't care about the cost," Dave hissed. He cares about the file count. He said we have too many files, wants to get the repository size down by 40% before the merger audit. He thinks it makes us look lean. I scanned the list. My eyes stopped at row 108. File, /usr/local/bin/core synthesis kproj owner. K. Mitchell reason for deletion, obfuscated logic, lacks documentation, non-standard file extension. Looks like junk data. Action, immediate purge. My heart didn't skip a beat. It hammered once, hard against my ribs, a singular thud of rage. Junk data. Core synthesis kproj wasn't junk. It was the beating heart of our security infrastructure. It was a custom key encapsulation mechanism. Chem, I had written 5 years ago when we realized standard RSA keys were getting too slow for the volume of legal docs we processed. Non-standard file extension was a security feature to prevent automated ransomware from encrypting our encryption keys. It was obfuscated because if you could read the logic, you could reverse engineer the master seed. Bryce was looking at a nuclear reactor control rod and calling it a useless metal stick. I walked over to the glass-walled fishbowl where Bryce was holding court with his new Tiger team, 3 guys in Patagonia vests who looked like they were 12 years old. Bryce, I said, stepping into the room. I didn't knock. He looked up, annoyed. Karen, we're in a sprint planning session unless the building is on fire. Row 108, I said, the core synthesis project, you have it marked for purge. Ah, yes, he leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. The mystery file. My guys looked at it. It's spaghetti code, Karen. It's dense, unreadable, and frankly, it smells like job security. We're replacing it with a standard AES 256 library. It's not just encryption, I said, keeping my voice dangerously level. It's the key generator. It links the timestamp of the merger contracts to the digital signature. If you delete that file, the handshake fails. The documents won't open. They will lock down permanently. Bryce rolled his eyes and looked at his Tiger team. They snickered. One of them, kid named Tyler, who was probably still on his parents' health insurance, spoke up. Actually, Karen, we checked the dependencies. Nothing calls that script. It's orphaned code. It's not running in the active pipeline. It's not running because it's an asynchronous daemon, I explained, trying to use small words. It wakes up only when a contract is accessed. If you check the logs, we checked the logs, Bryce interrupted. 0 activity in the last 48 hours, because nobody has opened a merger contract in the last 48 hours. Bryce stood up. He wasn't smiling anymore. Karen, stop. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You are hoarding code. You are clinging to the past. I have made a decision. The architecture is changing. We are moving to a unified security model. He leaned over the table, getting into my personal space. Your code is messy. It confuses the new developers. It goes. End of discussion. I looked at him. I looked at Tyler, who was smirking at his MacBook. I looked at the whiteboard where they had drawn a diagram of the new architecture that was basically just a bunch of arrows pointing to a cloud icon. A switch flipped in my head. The anger didn't vanish, but it froze. It crystallized into something sharp and useful. Okay, I said. Bryce blinked. He had expected a fight. He had expected me to beg. Okay, you're the CTO, I said. If you say it's junk, I'll focus on the UI transition like you asked. Good, Bryce said, relaxing instantly. Good, I knew you'd come around. See, it's liberating, isn't it? Letting go of the clutter. Liberating, I echoed. I walked out of the office. Dave was waiting for me in the hallway, looking terrified. Did you save it? He whispered. Did you convince him? No, I said, walking past him toward the break room. He's going to delete it. But, Karen, if he deletes the key generator, what happens to the archive? I stopped and looked at Dave. He was a good kid. He actually cared about the work. I decided to give him a crumb. Dave, do you remember when I told you to never hard-code credentials? Yeah. And do you remember when I told you that the smartest engineer isn't the one who writes the most code, but the one who knows where the backups are? He stared at me, confusion clouding his face. Karen, code's next on the block. He's going to wipe the drive by noon. Let him, I said, a small, cold smile touching the corners of my lips. It's already gone. What do you mean? I mean that core synthesis kproj on the server is just a shell, I lied. Well, it was a half-lie. The version on the server was the production instance. But the logic, the mathematical soul of the system, was currently sitting in my pocket, crypted on a USB drive that Bryce couldn't access in a million years. Go back to your desk, Dave, I said softly, and maybe update your resume, just in case. I went back to my cubicle. I opened the company's ticket system and created a new ticket, Ticket 9902, confirmation of deletion order for core synthesis. I wrote a brief note. Per CTO instructions, the encryption key generator is deemed redundant and approved for deletion. Security team advises against this action, but acknowledges executive override. I assigned the ticket to Bryce. 5 minutes later, my email pinged. Ticket closed. Status approved. Comment: stop being dramatic, Karen. Proceed. I saved the email as a PDF. I printed it. I put the paper in my bag. Then I opened my terminal. I found the file on the shared drive, the one Bryce was so eager to kill. I didn't delete it. I wouldn't do his dirty work for him. But I did rename it. I changed Core Synthesis Kproj to Legacy Trash Do Not Touch Old. If he wanted it gone, he would have to drag it to the trash bin himself. And I had a feeling he would enjoy it. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for him to step into it. 2 days later, the war room, formerly Conference Room B, was packed. Air conditioning was struggling to keep up with the collective body heat of 20 executives, 3 board members, and Bryce, who was sweating through his bespoke shirt. It was time for the alpha demo. This was the show and tell, where Bryce was supposed to prove that his lean, agile approach had revolutionized the merger platform. The acquisition partners from Apex Corp were dialing in via Zoom on the big screen. Their faces, pixelated, stern, and expensive-looking, loomed over us like judges at tribunal. I sat in the very back row, wedged between a pile of spare HDMI cables and the ficus plant. I wasn't technically invited, but corporate protocol demanded that a technical representative be present in case the Wi-Fi died. Bryce had made it clear I was there to be furniture, nothing more. Ladies and gentlemen, Bryce began, gesturing grandly at the projector screen. You are about to see is the future of secure document transfer. We have stripped away the clunky, archaic interfaces of the past. We have streamlined the back end. We have created the Vortal. He actually called it the Vortal. I heard the head of HR stifle a cough that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. On the screen, a slick, modern interface appeared. It had rounded corners, soft drop shadows, and lots of white space. It looked beautiful, looked like an app you'd use to order gluten-free muffins. As you can see, Bryce narrated, clicking his mouse, the user experience is frictionless. Drag, drop, done. He dragged a dummy file labeled Merger Contract Draft PDF into the upload box. A cheerful green checkmark appeared instantly. Upload complete. 0 latency, Bryce bragged. In the old system, this took 30 seconds. Why? Because the legacy code was choking on unnecessary encryption cycles. Optimized the path. Now it's instantaneous. I crossed my arms. It was instantaneous because it wasn't doing anything. I could tell just by looking at the response time. There was no handshake, no key exchange, no hashing. He was basically uploading a file to a public S3 bucket and calling it a secure transfer. Impressive speed, one of the Apex executives said from the screen. And the security protocols. These documents contain sensitive IP. Bryce didn't miss a beat. Military grade. We utilize a proprietary cloud-native shield that wraps the data in a dynamic envelope. Dynamic envelope. He was making it up as he went along. And what about the historical archive? The Apex guy asked. We need to verify the timestamps on the patent filings from 2018 before we sign off. Fully integrated, Bryce lied. We've migrated all legacy data to the new Vortal. It's all accessible through the single pane of glass. He clicked on the Archive tab. The screen populated with a list of file names. It looked perfect. Then he made the mistake of looking at me. Maybe he felt my eyes boring into the back of his skull. Maybe he just needed a punching bag to elevate his own status. He chuckled, gesturing toward the back of the room. You know, our lead security engineer, Karen, is back there. He was very concerned that we were moving too fast. He paused for effect. The room turned to look at me. Karen's encryption methods were so dense, I think even she forgot how they worked half the time. Right, Karen? A few sycophants laughed. The VP of sales smirked. It was a classic power move. Undermine the technical expert to make the risky shortcut seem like a genius management decision. I didn't frown. I didn't scowl. I slowly, deliberately, crossed my arms and offered a polite, tight-lipped smile. Complexity is often mistaken for confusion by the uninitiated, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but in the acoustic dead zone of the conference room it carried. The laughter died instantly. Bryce's smile faltered for a microsecond before he recovered. Right. Well, Complexity is the enemy of execution, he retorted, turning back to the screen. And as you can see, we are executing. Clicked on a file in the archive list. 2019 Patent Disclosure PDF. A loading spinner appeared. It spun and spun and spun. Just a little Wi-Fi lag, Bryce said quickly. Hotel internet, am I right? The spinner vanished. The file didn't open. Instead, a generic placeholder image of a document appeared. The preview is rendering, Bryce said, sweat starting to bead on his forehead. But trust me, the data is there. I looked to my left. Sitting 2 chairs away was Robert, the general counsel. He wasn't looking at the screen, he was looking at me. He was the one who had drafted the merger contract, including the clause about verifiable digital chains of custody. Robert raised an eyebrow, a silent question. Is he full of shit? I met his gaze. I gave the tiniest, almost imperceptible nod. Robert closed his notebook. He didn't say anything, but the shift in his body language was tectonic. He knew. Bryce wrapped up the demo with a flurry of slides showing projected cost savings. We are ready for the final data migration this weekend, he announced. Come Monday, the old system is history. As the room cleared out, Bryce stopped by my chair. He was high on adrenaline. See, he whispered, leaning down. Nobody cares about your math, Karen. They care about the UI. They care about the story. It was a nice story, Bryce, I said, standing up. I just hope the ending holds up. You're just bitter because I'm deleting your life's work, he sneered. I'm not bitter, I said, slinging my bag over my shoulder. I'm observant. You showed them a menu, Bryce, but you didn't check if the kitchen was on fire. I walked out. Let him have his victory lap. He didn't realize that by migrating the data without the active key generator, it was essentially moving 1,000 locked safes into a new room without bringing the combinations. He thought he was cleaning house. He was actually bricking the entire company. The fallout from the demo was slow at first, like a crack in a dam that starts as a hairline fracture. It began the next morning, not with a scream, but with a polite knock on my cubicle wall. It was Sarah from compliance. Sarah was a woman who lived her life in shades of beige and gray, terrified of any deviation from protocol. She held a printed copy of the merger agreement as if it were a holy text. Karen, she asked, her voice trembling slightly, do you have a minute? I have a question about the active keychained dual-auth signatures. I spun my chair around. What about them, Sarah? She fiddled with her glasses. Well, I was reviewing the technical specs Bryce sent over for the new Vortal, and I can't find the reference to the dual-auth chaining. Contract, Clause 14C specifically, states that all digital transfer files must be secured by an immutable, time-stamped keychain. I leaned back, interlacing my fingers. Clause 14C, yes. I wrote the technical requirements for that clause myself 3 years ago. Right, Sarah said, so? Where is it in the new system? Bryce said the new system is streamlined. But if we don't have that specific signature type, receiving bank's automated system will reject the transfer. The merger funds won't clear. This was the smoking gun. The Vortal was just a web interface. It didn't have the back-end logic to generate those specific, legally mandated cryptographic signatures. That logic lived in core synthesis kproj. The file Bryce had marked as junk. Did you ask Bryce? I asked innocently. I did, Sarah whispered, looking around to make sure nobody was listening. Told me not to worry about legacy legalese and that the cloud wrapper handles it. The cloud wrapper, I repeated. Sarah, there's no cloud wrapper. That's a marketing term. Sarah's face went pale, but he showed us the demo. The files uploaded. The green checkmark appeared. I looked her dead in the eye. Sarah, you can program a green checkmark to appear when you click a button. That doesn't mean the data was processed. It just means the button works. So, she swallowed hard, saying the system he demoed isn't compliant? I'm saying, I replied, lowering my voice to a conspiratorial whisper, that there is no system. There is a front end. There is a database. But the bridge between them, the encryption engine that satisfies Clause 14C, is currently sitting in a folder marked for deletion because Bryce thinks the file name is ugly. Sarah looked like she was going to faint. If we missed the transfer window because of a compliance rejection, the penalty fees alone are $5 million a day. I know, I said. Karen, you have to fix it. You have to put the code back. I can't, I said, gesturing to my screen. My right access was revoked. Bryce controls the repository. If I touch it, I'm violating a direct executive order. I could be fired for insubordination. But the merger, Sarah, I said gently. I did my job. I built the system. I maintained it. I warned him. Have a paper trail of tickets and emails. If Bryce wants to drive the bus off the cliff, I can't stop him from the backseat. I'm just a passenger now. Sarah clutched her binder to her chest. I need to talk to legal. You should, I agreed. Talk to Robert. Tell him to ask Bryce to demonstrate a live decryption of a Clause 14C document. Not a slide, a live decryption. Sarah nodded frantically and scurried away toward the executive wing. Turned back to my monitor. I wasn't happy, exactly. This was my company too. I had stock options. If the merger failed, they were worthless. But there was a grim satisfaction in watching the dominoes fall exactly as I had calculated. Bryce had mistaken engineering for decoration. He thought code was just something you bought and styled. He didn't understand that in our world, code is law. And you can't disrupt gravity, no matter how nice your suit is. Buzzed. A text from Dave. Dave, dude. Legal just stormed into Bryce's office. Why is everyone yelling about keys? I took a sip of my tea. It was still warm. Me, just tidying up, Dave, just tidying up. By 2:00 p.m., the atmosphere in the office had shifted from busy to hostage situation. The door to Bryce's office had been closed for an hour. Through the glass, I could see Robert, legal, and Sarah, compliance, gesturing wildly. Bryce was pacing, his face a mottled shade of crimson. Then the door flew open. Karen, Bryce bellowed. He didn't walk to my desk, he marched. Trailing behind him was a man I didn't recognize, a severe-looking guy in a charcoal suit carrying a heavy laptop. This was the auditor, the external validator from the acquiring bank. Karen, Bryce snapped, arriving at my cubicle. Mr. Henderson here is having trouble verifying the system integrity. He seems to think there's a gap. Mr. Henderson stepped forward. He looked like he ate tax codes for breakfast. Miss Mitchell, I'm attempting to run a standard handshake validation against your current repository. The hash matches for the static files, but whenever I try to generate a dynamic session key, the system times out. That's strange, Bryce interjected, his voice tight. It worked fine in the demo. The demo was a UI mockup, Bryce, I said calmly. I turned to the auditor. Mr. Henderson, you trying to validate against core synthesis? I'm trying to validate against the entire codebase, Henderson said. But yes, the call to the KEM, key encapsulation mechanism, returns a null value. That's because the KEM isn't linked, I said. It's been deprecated. We're moving to cloud native, remember? I shot a look at Bryce. Bryce's eyes bulged. Just fix it, Karen. Give him the test file he needs. I can't give him a file generated by a system that you flagged for deletion, Bryce. That would be deploying deprecated code. I am ordering you to generate a valid key. Bryce shouted. The entire office went silent. I looked at Henderson. Do you have a test payload? I do. Henderson handed me a USB stick. It's a dummy contract. Encrypt it using the Clause 14C standard. If you can open it and verify the signature, we pass. I took the stick. I plugged it in. Now, here was the moment of truth. I could have fixed it. I could have pulled up my hidden terminal, run the script from my personal backup, and saved Bryce's hide. But Bryce was standing there, vibrating with arrogance, treating me like a vending machine he had kicked to get a free soda. I typed a few commands. I pointed the system to the current active repository, the one Bryce had cleaned. /encrypt payload T14CI dummy contract PDF, the terminal blinked. Error, library not found. Dependency core synthesis missing or corrupt. I turned the screen so they could see it. It won't run, I said. The engine is gone, you sabotage. Bryce screamed. He actually pointed a finger in my face. You did this, you hid the dependencies. You made it fail on purpose to embarrass me. I didn't hide anything, I said, my voice rising just enough to be heard by the silent audience of engineers behind us. I told you. Row 108. You said it was junk. You said it was spaghetti code. You ordered it deleted. I am the CTO, Bryce roared. If I say it works, it works. You are obstructing a merger. You are going rogue. He turned to the security guard who stood near the elevators. Escort her out. Now. Revoke her badge. She is a security risk. Henderson, the auditor, looked shocked. Mr. Bryce, firing your lead engineer during a validation audit is highly irregular. She's not an engineer, Bryce spat. She's a roadblock. Get her out of here. I'll fix this myself. The security guard, a nice guy named Mike who had known for 10 years, looked at me apologetically. Karen, I gotta. It's okay, Mike, I said. I stood up. I didn't pack my box. I didn't grab my plant. Just took my purse and the encrypted USB drive in my pocket. I looked at Bryce one last time. He was red-faced, panting, convinced that by removing me, he was removing the problem. He didn't understand that the problem was the only thing holding the roof up. Good luck with the audit, Bryce, I said. And remember, RMRF is not a debugging tool. I walked to the elevators. I could feel the eyes of every engineer on my back. They were terrified. They were also witnessing something rare. The captain wasn't just going down with the ship. The captain was throwing the navigator overboard because he didn't like the news about the iceberg. I stepped into the elevator. The doors closed, shutting out the sound of Bryce yelling at Dave to find the backup. There was no backup on the server. The backup was in the elevator, and it was going down. I went home, poured a glass of Pinot Noir, and sat on my porch. Colorado air was crisp. My cat, Turing, wound himself around my ankles. It was peaceful. My phone, however, was having a seizure. It started about 20 minutes after I left the building. First, a text from Dave, OMG. He deleted it. He actually deleted the directory trying to reset the cache. Everything is red. Then the calls started. Missed call, Bryce CTO. Missed call, Robert Legal. Missed call, Bryce CTO 3. Missed call, unknown number, probably the CEO. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb. Back at the office, I knew exactly what was happening. When Bryce tried to fix the problem by deleting the corrupted cache, he would have triggered the failsafe I engineered 4 years ago. The system was designed to detect tampering. If the primary key generator, core synthesis, was removed without a proper decommissioning signature, the archive went into lockdown mode. It was a feature, not a bug. It was designed to prevent a hacker from wiping the logs to cover their tracks. If the logs were deleted, the vault slammed shut. Right now, every single merger document, every employment contract, every patent filing on the server was encrypting itself with a randomized 4096-bit key. Without the generator to reverse the math, those files were just digital noise. I took a sip of wine. I imagined Bryce staring at a screen that just said, "Access denied. System locked. Contact administrator." The sun began to set. The sky turned a brilliant, bruised purple. My phone lit up again, a voicemail. I decided to listen to one just for the schadenfreude. It was Bryce. He sounded breathless, like he had been running. "Karen, look, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. Things got heated, passionate. That's just how I lead, but I need you to come back and clarify some variable names. The system is acting weird. It's asking for a root seed. Just call me back. We can talk about your severance package, or a bonus. Just call me." He still didn't get it. He thought it was a negotiation. He thought he could buy the math. I didn't call back. Instead, I went to my personal laptop, an air-gapped machine I used for side projects. I took the ruggedized USB drive out of my pocket. I plugged it in. The file structure of the mirrored repository appeared. There it was. Core Synthesis Kproj. I wrote a small script, a simple executable. It took the mirrored repository, validated the hash against the company's public key, and reinstated the logic. It was a patch, a one-click cure. I named the file exit KYXE. I wasn't going to give it to them, not yet. You see, in encryption, there's a concept called proof of work. You have to expend energy to prove you are who you say you are. Bryce hadn't done the work, hadn't suffered enough to understand the value of what he had destroyed. I checked my email on my phone. An automated alert from the company's server, which I still had shadowed to my personal account because Bryce forgot to revoke my email aliases, popped up. Critical alert, storage integrity failure. Attempting recovery, failed. Critical alert, merger deadline imminent. 48 hours remaining. They were 48 hours away from losing a $500 million deal. The only person who could save them was currently watching a squirrel bury a nut in the garden. I took another sip of wine. "Let it burn for night," I told Turing. "Let them see how dark it gets without the light." The storm wasn't just brewing, it was overhead, and I was the only one with an umbrella. The next morning, a courier arrived at my house. He handed me a letter. It wasn't a lawsuit. It was a consulting contract. Rate, $500/hour. Scope, emergency system restoration. Signed, Robert, General Counsel. I laughed. $500 an hour. That wouldn't even cover the emotional damage of listening to Bryce use the word synergy. I shredded the contract. Back at the office, the situation had gone from crisis to funeral. I knew this because Dave was texting me a play-by-play from the bathroom stall. "Dave, the CEO is here. The Apex partners are physically here in the boardroom. Bryce is sweating so much he looks wet. He claims he fixed it overnight with a hotfix from a freelancer. He had probably hired someone off Upwork to patch a UI layer over the gaping hole in the back end. It was time. I didn't sign the contract. I didn't call. I just got in my car and drove to the office. I still had my physical access card. Bryce had ordered it revoked, but Security Mike had forgotten to process the request. Loyalty pays. I walked into the building. The reception area was eerily quiet. I took the elevator to the 40th floor. The boardroom was glass-walled. I could see everything. The CEO sat at the head of the table, looking like he was chewing glass. The Apex partners sat opposite, arms crossed, skepticism radiating off them like heat waves. Bryce stood at the front. He looked haggard. His eyes were wild. We experienced a minor glitch with the legacy cache, Bryce was saying, his voice cracking, but we have modernized the stack. What you're about to see is the fully realized Vortal. I stood outside the glass doors. Nobody noticed me yet. They were too focused on the screen. Bryce pulled up the core contract, the $500 million document. Merger agreement, final PDF. This document, Bryce said, is now secured by our new cloud algorithm. He moved the mouse to the execute button. This was it. The moment the digital signatures were supposed to merge and lock. We're clean, Bryce boasted. We've modernized everything. He clicked. The screen flashed white. A loading bar appeared, verifying signatures, checking timestamp. Then the screen turned a violent shade of red. Critical error, decryption failed. Primary key not recognized. Chain of custody broken. A siren sound, actually a system alert I had installed for catastrophic failure, blared from the speakers. Apex partner stood up. What is this? Where is the contract? It's just a rendering error. Bryce stammered, clicking frantically. It's the display driver. The file is fine. He clicked again. Error, file corrupted. Unable to decrypt. The file icon on the screen changed from a PDF symbol to a jagged, broken page icon. You lost the contract? The CEO asked, his voice barely a whisper. Bryce, did you lose the merger contract? No, it's the old code. Bryce yelled, slamming his hand on the table. It's that damn legacy junk interfering with my new system. It's Karen's fault. She left booby traps. That was my cue. I pushed the glass doors open. I didn't leave traps, Bryce, I said. My voice was calm, cutting through the panic like a scalpel. I left load-bearing walls. You're the one who removed them. The room froze. All heads turned to me. I stood in the doorway, wearing jeans and a hoodie, looking like the only person in the room who wasn't about to have a heart attack. You, Bryce pointed a shaking finger at me. You did this. You sabotaged the key generator. I didn't touch the key generator, I said, walking slowly toward the head of the table. You did. You marked it for deletion. You said it was bloated. You said it was junk. It is junk. Bryce screamed. He was losing it completely now. The facade of the cool, tech bro visionary had crumbled, revealing a frightened, incompetent child. It's incompatible with the new architecture. It's causing conflicts. If I could just scrub the last remnants of your trash code off the server, the new system would work. Is that what you think? I asked, stopping at the end of the table. I looked at the CEO. He thinks my code is the problem. He thinks if he deletes the cache, the last place the encryption keys are temporarily stored, the system will magically reset and work. It will. Bryce insisted. It's a caching error. I need to purge the legacy temp files. I looked at Bryce. If you purge the temp files without the master generator active, you wipe the encryption keys. Permanently, the documents will never open again. They will be random noise forever. Liar. Bryce spat. You're just trying to protect your job. You're trying to make yourself indispensable. He grabbed the keyboard. He opened the command terminal on the main screen, navigated to the cache directory. rmrf/var/cache/secure keys/ he typed the command. His finger hovered over the enter key. Get that trash code off my system, Bryce sneered. I'm deleting it myself. Do it, I said. The CEO stood up. Wait, no, I said, locking eyes with Bryce. Let him do it. He's the CTO. He knows best. Go ahead, Bryce. Delete the legacy code. Disrupt the industry. Bryce looked at me. He looked at the code. Wanted to be right so badly. He wanted to prove that he didn't need me, that he didn't need the past. He smashed the enter key. Executing delete. Cache cleared. For a second, nothing happened. Bryce smiled triumphantly. See, gone. Now watch the Vortal work. He clicked on the contract again. The screen didn't turn red this time. It turned black. A single line of text appeared in plain white DOS font. Fatal error, keychain lost. Merger package corrupted. Data recovery impossible. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a collapsing star. Where did it go? Bryce whispered. He clicked the mouse. Nothing. Where did the file go? It didn't go anywhere, I said softly. The data is still there, but you just shredded the dictionary we used to read it. You just turned $500 million into digital confetti. The CEO slumped into his chair. The Apex partners were already packing their briefcases. Deleted the keys, the general counsel said, his voice hollow. You actually deleted the keys. Bryce stared at the screen, his mouth open. I thought it was just cash. You thought wrong, I said. The panic began to set in. The CEO was shouting for IT support. The Apex partners were on the phone with their lawyers. Bryce was pale, looking like he might actually vomit on the mahogany table. Fix it, the CEO yelled at Bryce. Undeleted. Something I can't, Bryce stammered. It's a secure wipe. It's gone. It's not gone, I said. The shouting stopped. They looked at me again. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the ruggedized USB drive. It glinted under the fluorescent lights. The code you hated, the legacy junk, I held the drive up. It wasn't just code. It was the decryption key generator. And because I knew you were going to do something this stupid, I made a mirror. Bryce's eyes widened, lunged forward. Give it to me. I pulled my hand back. No, that is company property. The CEO shouted. Karen, plug that in right now. I don't work here, I said calmly. Bryce fired me. Remember, security risk, going rogue. Karen, please, the CEO begged, his tone shifting instantly from command to desperation. We will reinstate you. We will double your salary. Just plug it in. I looked at the drive. Then I looked at Bryce. He was broken. His ego had been stripped away, leaving nothing but a scared man in a suit he couldn't afford anymore. The code wasn't the product, I said, my voice echoing in the silent boardroom. The code was the lock. The product was the people who knew how to turn the key. You fired the product. I turned toward the door. Where are you going? Bryce shrieked. You can't leave, you have the key. And it just left the building, I said. I walked out. Security. Stop her, the CEO yelled. Ike, the security guard, was standing by the elevators. He saw me coming. He heard the CEO screaming. He looked at me. He looked at the chaos in the boardroom. He stepped aside and held the elevator door open. Have a good one, Karen, Mike said. You too, Mike, I said. I stepped in. The doors closed on the image of Bryce scrambling over chairs, trying to reach me too late. I walked out of the building and into the sunlight. It was a beautiful day. My phone buzzed. It was a text from the CEO. CEO, name your price. Anything, please. I didn't reply. I walked to my car. I would give them the key eventually. I wasn't a monster. There were innocent people working there, people like Dave and Sarah, whose livelihoods depended on that merger. But not today, and not for free. Consulting rates just went up. I started my car. I put on some Danny DeVito Asthma, don't judge, it's soothing, and drove away. The legacy was gone. But the engineer, she was just getting started.